All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to crack open a text that's about 2,500 years old, the Piagetica Sutta. And you might be thinking, what can a text that old really teach us about our lives today? Well, it turns out a whole lot. We're talking about some seriously practical wisdom here.
So let me ask you something right off the bat. The person, the thing, the goal you love the most, can it also be the source of your deepest pain? It's a tough question, right? But it's something we've probably all experienced. That feeling that the things that give us the greatest joy also hold the power to hurt us the most. We're going to get to the bottom of that connection.
The source for all this insight? It's the Piagetica Sutta. And I want you to think of this less as some dusty old religious text and more like an incredibly sharp piece of human psychology that just happens to be ancient. It's basically a story about a man dealing with overwhelming grief and a powerful king who has this huge aha moment about his own life. It's really fascinating stuff.
Okay, first up, the price of our love. So what exactly is the cost of caring so deeply? We're going to explore how our attachments, the bonds we form with people and things, are the very things that shape our emotional world, but also, paradoxically, the things that can really open us up to pain. And what's so wild is that this ancient idea lines up almost perfectly with a modern psychological concept called attachment theory. Basically, modern psychology tells us that the more we rely on someone or something for our sense of well-being, the more it's going to hurt when it's gone. I mean, it's just incredible to think that the Sutta was talking about this thousands of years before we gave it a scientific name.
Now, it's really important to get this next point. The Sutta is not saying don't love or don't get attached. That's a huge misunderstanding people often have. The whole point isn't to shut down your heart. It's about learning how to manage the expectations and the fear that naturally come packaged with love.
So how do we actually do that? Well, the Sutta gives us a pretty practical three-step game plan. First, you cherish your loved ones right here, right now, in the present moment. Really be with them. Second, you have to accept a fundamental truth. Nothing lasts forever. Separation is just a natural part of life. And when you put those two together, you get step 3, what you could call expectation management. It's this mindset that prepares you, that builds up your resilience for when, not if, sorrow shows up. All right, our next section is about something you've definitely seen online, beyond toxic positivity. We're going to talk about that relentless pressure to always be happy, and how this ancient text offers a much more realistic and, frankly, healthier way to live. You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? You see it all over social media. It's this idea of toxic positivity. This belief that no matter what's happening, you have to find the silver lining, you have to choose happiness, and just push down any of those so-called bad feelings. It's this constant pressure to perform being happy, even when you're not.
And this is where the sutta gets really direct. See, in the story, you've got this grieving father and even a group of gamblers who all share this simplistic belief that the things they love should only bring them happiness. But then the Buddha hits them with this dose of harsh reality. Nope. The things you love the most, the things you're most attached to, are also the things that can cause you the most pain. They're your greatest vulnerabilities.
And that leads to a super important takeaway here. Real strength, genuine resilience. It doesn't come from putting on a happy face and pretending everything's fine. No way. It's forged in the fire of actually facing reality. The good, the bad, the beautiful, and the painful. All of it.
Okay, so how does this play out in real life? Let's get super practical and talk about one of the most intense attachments any of us can experience, parenting. We're diving into parenting with wise love.
Remember the father from the story? He's so destroyed by grief that he literally can't eat or work. His pain is an ancient, timeless example of something we talk about all the time today, helicopter parenting. It's that kind of over-attachment where a parent's own happiness and identity gets so wrapped up in their child's life that it just creates this massive amount of anxiety.
So this really boils down to two very different ways of loving. On the one hand, you have possessive love. This is that my child is my property kind of thinking. It ends up creating a ton of anxiety for the parent and, frankly, it smothers the child's freedom. But on the other hand, you have wise love. This is where you balance that deep, caring affection, what's called metta, with equanimity or upekkha. It means loving your child completely while also giving them the space to be their own independent person.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit. We've talked about family. Now let's talk about the office. Because this wisdom about attachment is surprisingly crucial when it comes to leadership. Let's look at the detached leader's strength.
So, the other key figure in this story is King Kosala, and he has this amazing moment of clarity, prompted by his very clever wife, where he's forced to look at all his own attachments, his power, his queen, his army, even his entire kingdom. He suddenly realizes that every single one of these things he holds dear could also be a source of immense pain for him.
And think about what that means for a leader. The attached leader, the one whose ego is tied up in a specific project or their own status, they can become biased. They'll fight against necessary changes because it feels personal. But the detached leader? They see their role as a responsibility, not personal ownership. They can make clear, objective decisions for the good of the team or the company, and they're open to new ideas because their ego isn't on the line.
So, as we start to bring this all together, it really comes back to this one central quote. The point isn't to blame love, but to learn to manage the expectations that come with it. This was never about building walls around your heart to avoid getting hurt. It's about loving with your eyes wide open. It's about learning to work with your own mind.
You know, when you really look at it, this 2,500-year-old story isn't just some historical artifact. It's a practical, profound guide to our own mental and emotional health. It gives us a blueprint for how to build real emotional security, not by avoiding life, but by understanding ourselves better.
So I'll leave you with a final thought to take with you. Just take a moment to think about your own life, your job, your relationships, maybe even an idea you have about yourself. Which attachment could you look at with a little more of this wisdom? What would change if you could love it fully, without being afraid of its temporary nature? Something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me.